Last night, as my husband and I climbed into bed, we always climb in and the lights off, and we always pray together. We always pray every night for our servicemen and women serving around the world, for those families that are holding down the fort, for those precious new brides, for the grandparents, for the children that are sacrificing too. We pray for them faithfully. And prayer, if there's one theme for my entire experience as a war mama, it is the power of prayer. I have seen miracles, and the biggest miracle for me is that my son, Tim, he has experienced those miracles, powerful experiences of deliverance from incredible danger. And one that I would love to share that I journaled. And one thing I did do, and this is for mamas out there, something that might really help, and it helped me. I didn't do it every time, but my son did have 2 tours in Bosnia back in the late 90s, and those were his first times to go to war. And the second time when he had returned, they were 6-month tours. Mm-hmm. The second time that he returned, I knew what we were dealing with because we had gone through the first one, the first tour, and I knew it was very dangerous. And it was wartime. And at the time we lived in Tennessee, and I'm not a morning person at all. I sleep late every day, and it's part of health issues, but that's just me. I'm a night owl, if anything. But one morning, at 4:45, I looked at my clock. I rolled over, and I saw 4:45 on the night little clock. And that was unusual for me because I just did not wake up at that time. I woke up at 8:30 or 9, but I woke up at 4:45, and my husband was beside me, sound asleep. And I just clearly heard, not audibly, but I heard, "Get up and pray. Get up and pray." And I did. I got up and I went out of the master bedroom, down the hallway, and I went into my sewing room. And I had a little day bed in the sewing room. And I knelt and I prayed. And I prayed for probably 45 minutes to an hour for Tim. And I had no idea what, why, but I did it. I felt so called to do this. And at the end of that time of prayer, I got up, I went and I got back in bed, and I just fell right to sleep. 2 days later, I received a phone call from Tim, and phone calls were rare because they were out in the middle of nowhere. But I received a phone call, and Tim said, "Mom, I have to ask you a question." He said, 2 days ago, and he didn't begin telling me what had happened, but he said, "Were you praying for me specifically? Was there something? Did you feel led?" And I said, "Honey," and I told him about 4:45 a.m., and he just gasped, and he said, "Oh my goodness, Mom." He said, "That was exactly," and he said, "That was exactly," it was 10:45 in the morning where we were located, and it was, he began to share a story. And Tim was not one, just like all the others, he was not one that shared things. He waited, and in fact, he waited years to share a lot of things. And when he got home, sometime after the first tour, he would share some things, but very little. And that is just something part of training. You're very discreet. Partly out of security, but partly out of respect for those that have perished, for those that have been harmed in some way, or even those local people in that country. There's a great respect. Tim felt that towards the Bosnian people, very much so. But anyway, he began describing what had happened. And I feel comfortable in sharing this because it's so many, many, many years later. But Tim and another, there were 3 or 4, I think. They were in a Humvee, and they were climbing a mountain not far from Sarajevo. And if you watch the Olympics, it's a very mountainous area. And they were climbing a mountain on a highway that was, if you look over the edge, was probably 1,000 feet at least drop. And there were some guardrails, but not always. And he said, we were actually going up the hill. And he said, we're just, very careful going along. And I don't recall if Tim said he was driving or he was in the passenger side, I'm not sure. But he said, we could see in the distance because it's a third world country, a lot of people don't have good vehicles. And he said, we could see this truck. And it was careening down this very steep grade. And he said it was careening, it had lost its brakes. And he said it was just all over, and he said it was coming straight at us. And it was getting closer and closer and closer, and it was on our side. And we were on the side, I think they were on the right side, close to the cliff. And he said, I saw my life just flash before my eyes. And we all just braced ourselves. And he said, Mom, no, it had reached a point where it was just not quite to impact, and it suddenly went whoosh and veered to the other side of the road, the side that was against the mountain. And he said, we were spared, but if it had hit us, he said, we knew. And he said, that was at 10:45 that happened. And I said, honey, we're 6 hours difference in time zones. That was a confirmation, and a really, I think, very winsome and cute thing that came from that is that whenever our son would go on patrol, the compound that he was in, it was a very small compound. It was a NATO compound, and it was actually sponsored by another country. He wasn't in an American compound, but he had a couple of different fellows that were English speaking that when they would go on patrol, they'd always say, we're going with Tim. His mom's praying.